life has said some silly...
You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical Rant.
There is a panic in the air, ladies and gentlemen, and it has to do with marijuana. No, it's not the threat of pot zombies coming after strains. No. It's the rehab industry scared to death. They're just about to lose that steady trickle of people assigned to be their clients. Those easily rehabbed people who help puff up the statistics of how successful they are so they can continue to get more federal grants and more customers from the criminal justice system. In fact, according to the treatment episode data set for admissions, which accounts for about 58% of the admissions into rehabilitation centers in the United States, fully 59% of those who are admitted solely for cannabis are admitted there because of the criminal justice system forced them to be there. That's about 3 out of 5 rehabbers in there for pot alone, forced there by a drug court. And then, of course, when you force them to stop smoking pot on the threat of P-tests that will send them to jail, it's amazing how successful your rehab program is. Well, one of those rehabbers has shown up in the pages of Huffington Post. The name is Denny Carice, scientist clinician for substance abuse treatment field. What? Someone who's in substance abuse has this to say: legalizing marijuana, the real costs. And this is pretty much as compact as you can get the Project Sam talking points into one written piece. So I got to congratulate her on that, at least. Good job on the writing here. She opens up by noting that the polls now are anywhere from 40 to 52% support for legalization of marijuana. And she wants to, of course, scare us into what a terrible idea that would be by asking, what are some of the real costs our country would pay for legalizing pot? All right. Well, the first one is the one that we call the Sabbat conjecture. Tax savings. At what cost? Pro-legalization groups are often comparing the potential tax revenue of marijuana with alcohol and tobacco. Huh? I don't recall ever comparing what we'd make off marijuana to what we'd make off alcohol or tobacco. I've said treat it like alcohol, tax it and regulate it, but I never said we'd make as much off alcohol. But anyway, all right. And she says here, of course, the revenue doesn't come close to the enormous costs to society from alcohol and tobacco. This is the Sabbat conjecture. We can't legalize marijuana because then it would cost us more than the taxes would bring in. Just like alcohol and tobacco. They bring in about $40 billion in taxes. They cost about $400 billion in the productivity and the drunk driving deaths and the cirrhosis and the lung cancer and yada, yada, yada. Well, here's the problem with the Sabbat conjecture. That would be scary if marijuana were alcohol and tobacco. But alcohol and tobacco are toxic and addictive. See, alcohol, and this is from her writing, this is from the Huffington Post piece. In 2010, there were 15,990 alcohol liver deaths and 25,692 alcohol-induced deaths, excluding alcohol-related accidents and homicides. Right. And in 2010, there were 0 related marijuana deaths from 0 overdoses on marijuana. In the prior year, there were 10,839 traffic fatalities and alcohol-impaired driving crashes. Well, I'm not going to say 0 people got high and wrecked their car. But then again, we're not really seeing a huge public safety problem with marijuana drivers out there. In fact, we're seeing in the states where marijuana has been legalized, Colorado and Washington, their deaths, their fatalities per 10,000 miles have fallen at a rate greater than states with stricter laws like, say, Texas or Georgia. So I'm not saying marijuana is not dangerous on the roads. What I'm saying is it doesn't seem to be reflected in the statistics so far. So she also brings up figures that would be even higher if you figured in injuries and accidents or living with emphysema, lung or liver disease. Right. emphysema, lung, or liver disease, things that you do not get when you're using marijuana. Here's the simplest way to puncture the Sabbat conjecture. Whatever the cost to society that exists from marijuana, it exists now. Legalizing pot doesn't invent marijuana. There are already about 17 million people using it monthly. So whatever that costs us, we're paying that now. And we're paying a whole bunch more money in the 15 billion range to prohibit marijuana and not succeeding. And we're bringing in zero in taxes. Okay, so now we have marijuana cost plus prohibition cost plus zero in taxes. And that somehow is better than marijuana legal and taxed, bringing in the money and not having to spend so much on the enforcement. I know I went to public school, but for some reason the Sabbat conjecture don't work out for me. Now, the next point she wants to get to is the the emergency room. You know, we have to understand from her point of view, marijuana is dangerous because in 2011, marijuana was involved in 455,668 emergency room visits nationwide. Folks, let me tell you the secret of the whole emergency room visit statistic. This comes from the Drug Abuse Warning Network, and what it does is it tracks the mentions or detections of drugs in people that are admitted to an emergency room. So, let's say I go snorkeling on vacation. I'm snorkeling along, and you know, I smoked a joint on the beach, right? I go snorkeling along, and I get stung by a jellyfish. And they rush me to the ER. And they test my blood, or they ask me if I'd been smoking, and one way or another, they find out I'd smoked some pot, and guess what? That's a marijuana-related emergency room visit, even though the pot had very little to do with the jellyfish stinging me, right? And similar things can happen when people are coming in from car wrecks or injuries or 911 calls, and they test the pee or they test the blood of the person who's come in, and they find metabolites of marijuana in their system, and they say, aha! Marijuana-related emergency room visit, even though it was a joint the guy had smoked last night at a party or last week or whatever. That's the problem with any statistic about how many marijuana users there are, is that how they consider you a marijuana user is based on your body chemistry that only shows you had been using marijuana, not are using marijuana when the event happened. Now, another thing she likes to point out is the criminal justice relief. Right, is that many people think that the prisons are full of people that use marijuana, which isn't true. About half of the prisoners are there for something drug-related, but it's not all marijuana. But she likes to say there are many people related to their marijuana use, but they're not there because they're convicted of a marijuana offense. Essentially, no one is in jail for solely using marijuana. No one. It's only 0.3% of 1.6 million people, which is about 4,800 people. But that's no one. That's just, almost 5,000 people in jail solely for marijuana. Yeah, it's just nobody. But she points out that a lot of the people are there because they're on probation, and then they test positive while on probation for another crime, right? So the pot test gets them put back in jail for the burglary or whatever, right? She says it's a misguided and unnecessary policy and should modify this policy to address prison overcrowding without having to legalize marijuana. Well, okay, so it would be something illegal, but people on probation who do it wouldn't go back to prison, but people who aren't on probation who do it could? Just legalize it already. What's this next one? Oh, I love this next one. The reports about the adolescents. Recent National Institutes of Health reports show that fewer adolescents believe that regular marijuana use is harmful to their health. Really? Fewer kids these days who've grown up their entire life with a number of states allowing for the medical use of marijuana for various serious ailments somehow think it's less dangerous than the generation who grew up being told it would lead straight to heroin and man boobs and chromosomal damage and amotivational syndrome and Cheeto-stained fingers and being a loser the rest of your life. And even the president coming on TV and talking about how the smoking of one marijuana cigarette would be equal in brain damage to standing on Bikini Island during an A-bomb blast. Wow! Shocking! Somehow the kids today don't think pot's as scary. Whoa! Blows my mind. This has been the problem with marijuana prohibition and dealing with the kids, is because you told them such bullshit with respect to cannabis, the safest drug. Once they took that and they found out it was pretty benign, they believed that all the rest of the stuff you told them about the really hard, dangerous drugs was bullshit too. That's a dual disservice. The next thing, oh yes, of course, it's more potent. The adolescents are using pot at a younger age, more likely to use on a daily basis, and marijuana that is much more potent than that used by previous generations. It's not your father's Woodstock weed, people. It's ultra super potent. It's up to 20%, sometimes 30% in these buds, sometimes even 90% in these dabs. So take this 100% Marinol pill with no CBD in it. What else do we got here? Oh, yes, of course, pot smoking will make you psychotic and stupid. The mental development is associated with the onset of major mental illnesses, including psychosis, schizophrenia, depression, and anxiety, despite the fact that the incidences of schizophrenia and schizotypal disorders have remained pretty much constant for 100 years. Ever since, they've been taking mental records, back to in Britain. They've looked through decades and decades and decades of these records and found no real statistical change in the amount of schizophrenia or psychosis in the population. Even during the 60s when pot use went up, in the 70s when it was sky high, in the 80s when it went down, in the 90s and it went back up, but the schizophrenics still stay about 1%, 1.1% of the population. Oh, and finally, I love this one. Legalizing marijuana will increase users, increase frequency, and have long-term consequences for our youth. Legalizing marijuana sends the explicit message to our youth that this drug is okay, that it is harmless, when it is addictive and can destroy their lives. Yes, if we legalized pot, it would tell the kids how great it is. Like legalized tobacco. You know how legalized tobacco means that we think tobacco's okay for kids and kids should use tobacco, and we can't stop talking to the kids about how great tobacco is because it's legalized and that means it's okay, right? Hey, if you're a tobacco smoker out there, raise your hand if you think anybody's been giving you some positive messages about smoking lately. Give me a break, Denny Carice. You're just trying to save your job and your steady income. The gig is up. Prohibition is on its way out. Find yourself a new job.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting